Hello, everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of HBCU Highlights. My name is Andrea Evans. I have the pleasure of introducing you to my fabulous co-host, Ashley Deadweiler-Jones. And buckle up because we have an amazing guest today. We have Dr. Christopher Jones, Ph.D. And just when you thought it was no more education to get, you think of Dr. Chris Jones because he's a double major physicist, mathematician from Morehouse College, went to MIT and got not one master's degree, two master's degree, then got a PhD. From there, he is now currently the head of the Arkansas Regional Innovation Hub in Arkansas. So we're going to hear his journey from Arkansas to Boston, to Atlanta. He's going to tell us everything. So Dr. Christopher Jones, welcome to another amazing episode of HBCU Highlights. We're so happy that you can join us today.
Thanks, friend. Good to be here.
Well, I am happy to see you and just so proud of everything you've done since Morehouse College. But let's just take it back to right after high school when it was time to go to college. You chose Morehouse. Why did you choose to go to Morehouse College?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me on. When you invited me to join, I almost said no because we've known each other for a long time. And we're like, oh, she's gonna pull out some stories. So I might not want to do this, but you promised me that you wouldn't go too deep into that, or at least I think you did. I've always wanted to go to Morehouse, even as a kid. I wanted to go to Morehouse for undergrad, in part because I saw the legacy of Dr. King. And in part because I watched A Different World and saw what it meant to be on a Black college campus. But the other sort of layer that I think was important is I grew up in a Black college town. So Pine Bluff has the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Both my parents are Black college graduates. Both my brother and my sister were in college at the time as I was sort of deciding. So going to a Black college was a definite. It's just a matter of where. And the inspiration of King led me to Morehouse.
So, Dr. Jones, you have a legacy. Your family, you have an HBCU history, a foundation. Morehouse was going to be the place to be for you. Now, I'm sure you had a chance to kind of take a look at other schools, but why was Morehouse the one that intrigued you and the place to be for you?
That's an interesting question. And actually, for me, my path was a little bit different. I say early on, I felt called. I felt that God was leading me to certain places. So I wanted to go to Morehouse and I wanted to go to MIT. And for undergrad, I only applied to Morehouse and I only applied to MIT for grad school. Now, folks thought I was crazy. They thought I was more crazy when it came time for grad school, but they thought I was crazy when it came down for undergrad. But my philosophy was I felt like this was where I belonged. And I felt like this is where God was calling me to be. And so if I was going to do it, then I was going to go all in. So I only applied there.
Wow. So you're just a one and done, and what an amazing story. So what did you major in Morehouse? And tell us why you chose that major, because it's rare to see a Black man study physics, number one, but then to have the nerve to do another major in math. Like, what was going on, Chris? Tell us.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to do, I wanted to go to Morehouse, go to MIT, and I wanted to become an astronaut. I was inspired by Ronald McNair, which is kind of the MIT and astronaut combo. And all of us were sitting in front of some screen as children when the Challenger blew up. And for me, it was a call to action to say, instead of running from it, let's lean in. I was fascinated by space. So I applied to Morehouse thinking that I would do physics. Now, the other part of the backstory is I wanted to go to Morehouse. My parents didn't have any money to send me there, but they didn't tell me that. And I was blessed to get a call one day from the NASA Scholars Office, and they said, hey, would you like to have a full ride to Morehouse? And the only requirement is you have to work at NASA during the summertime. So it was a complete and utter blessing to be able to do that. And that's what led me to doing physics. Turns out at Morehouse, to get a physics major, you pretty much had to get a math minor as well. So I said, hey, why not just get a math major?
So Dr. Jones, you were focused on academics from day one, and we love that. But I know Morehouse is it's a lot to do there. It's a lot of fun stuff. And I know you said, we're going to stay hands off with some things. But what are some of your most memorable times at Morehouse? I know there were plenty, but what really sticks out to you as something that was like the moment that you had that really meant everything to you?
That's a great question. And that's a hard question because I think there were as you mentioned, there were so many defining moments at Morehouse. And we did a lot more than just study. I was blessed to be able to be the Student Government Association president during my senior year. So that year was filled with moments. One of them that kind of stands out right now in this time, actually two of them I would say, are the time that I got to spend with Spike Lee, because he was on the board of trustees and I was on the board of trustees as well. And he and I got to actually walk over to Spelman's campus and watch Zora and Lorraine. It was a play that was happening on campus and we got to watch it together. And so just spending that time with him was pretty enlightening. And then the other, because it really all goes back to relationships. The other was the time I got to spend with Maynard Jackson. And I got to really get to know him a little bit, spend some time with him. And he helped lead a protest/voter registration drive during our senior year. So those stand out. And at the same time, I think the most significant of anything, those are kind of emblematic of relationships, but the relationships that I had with my Morehouse brothers and my Spelman sisters and my Clark brothers and sisters and my Morris Brown brothers and sisters, it wraps up my entire experience to make those 4 years phenomenal. And I think the capstone of it, really, when you look back on what we were able to do together, we sort of, as a unit of colleges, we brought back the Spellhouse connection. They had been doing things separately, and we brought that back. And during homecoming, we had homecoming events at each of the schools in the AUC. So our concert was at Morris Brown, and we did a parade with Clark. And so that, to me, that was what it meant to be at a Black college, where no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter what experiences you've had, someone is there to connect with you, and someone is there to help make you better, and you can make someone else better.
I love that, and I love hearing the story that you had a good balance. Like you said, when you think of science, most people think, oh, you're in your room 24/7 studying, and it is hard work, but being a McNair scholar, you were able to be surrounded by other like-minded men. And then because you worked at NASA in the summer, you had your Spelman sisters, and we all just pushed each other. So I'm just really proud of you. And I want to take it to the point where you graduated and you decided to press on and continue to pursue STEM. So tell us about MIT, and I know why you chose it, but what did you study at MIT, and how did Morehouse prepare you for that MIT experience?
Yeah, so I studied nuclear engineering at MIT. I went there for nuclear engineering. It was kind of a similar story. I went for one thing and then found that doing something else would be very beneficial. But the reason I did nuclear engineering is because my mentor at NASA was an astronaut, Franklin Chang Diaz, and he had graduated from MIT's nuclear engineering department and was telling me about the work that you can do and the research. And so I was able to work in the Plasma Science and Fusion Center, doing a few different things there. But I think for me, what stands out beyond the academics is because the reality is I felt like I was an imposter on campus when I walked on campus. Now, it turns out they did a study of MIT students, and about 70% of MIT students felt like they were imposters. So I was amongst good company. And that's because the place really does bring some very bright folks together. The beauty of that place is that it wasn't about competition with others, it was about competition with yourself. So we all quickly learned that it's really about how hard can I push myself and how much can I drive myself to be the best. And I think that's where my HBCU background came in handy. And it turns out, and this is anecdotal, but if you look at the students that went to HBCUs and then went to Ivies, majority colleges, they tended to, in the long run, do a little bit better. And I think part of it is because during our time at HBCUs, we are taught that you have to work hard and you have to do whatever it takes to bring out the best in you. And you're not alone. There are others that will support you. My wife went to Howard University, and then she went to Harvard for med school, and she had a similar experience. In that the grounding that we got in our HBCU, the internal fortitude, allowed us to push through all the regular challenges of grad school that were laid on top of the regular challenges of being a Black student in grad school, and that helped to bring about success. And
now,
it wasn't.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying, and it was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And trust me, I failed quite often. One quick story: my first exam at MIT, I studied really, really hard for it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do at least okay. Might not get 100%, but I'll do okay. And I felt like, all right, I can do this. Turns out I got the grade back, the test back, and I had one digit in my grade, and it was out of 100. So I completely bombed that. I didn't even make it. I didn't even get to 10. And I learned a lot from that experience, that I needed to change the way I studied. I needed to change the way I thought. I needed to change the way I approached things. But I think I was able to not feel like a failure because of that lesson as a result of having spent the time I spent at Morehouse.
Wow. So, as I listen to you, I'm honestly thinking to myself, I'm like, this young man had such big dreams, and looking at what's going on and has been going on in the world that we live in for so long, it seems so big for an African-American man to have the kind of dreams that you have, and not just dream it, but to achieve it, to be the SGA president at Morehouse, right? To have that type of leadership. We know that the brothers at Morehouse are like already the creme de la creme, but for you to be that leader, for you to step outside of Morehouse and be at MIT and then continue to get these engineering degrees and want to lean in to learn more about being an astrophysicist, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong. Who was there to really mold you and shape you to dream this big? Who was that? If there could have been a number of people, but to do these things with all the odds that are against us, especially African-American men, it's like, wow, how did you get there?
Yeah, that's a real question. And the list is long. It starts with my parents, and that starts with their parents. They taught us that against all odds that we can do whatever we set our minds to do. My mom's parents taught them that if you get an education, then no one else can take it from you. And they only had a third grade education, but they really believed in the value of education. And it came from being in a Black college town where folks said, regardless of the color of your skin, like you can, if you set forth with a dream, you can push to get there. But I think in the DNA of it all is my faith as a Christian. And I believe that despite all the ills and the struggles of our time, and they are many, despite all the things that we've dealt with for centuries, and the systemic issues that kind of really work to bring us back and oppress us and rip us apart, my faith in Christ allows me to say that even in the midst of that, that I can have a hope that things will change, and I know that I have to use my hands to work to help them change. So I think it was all of that. And again, I'll say the list of support was long. I had folks at Morehouse, at Spelman, outside in Atlanta and beyond that were like, hey, we want to help you. We have your back. And my responsibility to them was to make sure that I had somebody else's back at all times.
Wow. Well, hey, like they say, you are your brother's keeper, and sounds like it started at a young age just with your family and your community. And that's amazing to have had that experience in a Black college town. You grew up in the backyard of an HBCU. So you were destined for greatness. And I want to go back to that score that you got that wasn't even a 10, like you said, but you kept going. So you got that master's in nuclear engineering, and then you got another master's. So tell us about that second master's and why you pressed on to continue to get another master's.
Yeah, so I went to MIT thinking that I would become an astronaut. I ended up letting that dream go for a couple of reasons. One, because I can't hear out of my right ear, and that would be a disqualifier. But more importantly, I met my wife, and she was like, "You're not going to space." So there you go. That wasn't happening. But regardless of that, what I realized was that if I wanted to make big change, it's important to know the science. It's important to know the technical aspects. And yet, even with that, there are barriers that prevent really good scientists, really good engineers from making the kind of scalable change that they want to make. What are those barriers? A lot of times those barriers are policy barriers. A lot of times it's politics. So that's the reason I picked up the technology and policy masters, which allowed me as an engineer to learn about what are the policy levers, how do you move policy levers, and how do you influence policy, whether you're in an elected office or not. So I picked that up, and I think that was helpful in me seeing the world in a different way. And it actually was helpful for me deciding on what I would do for my Ph.D., which was urban studies and planning. Now, my research was on large-scale energy systems, but in the Ph.D. program, I was able to learn more about sociology, learn more about history, learn more about how folks interact, how the rural-urban divide, which really shouldn't be a divide. So there's so many things that I was able to learn, and I think having a technical background, it really positioned me to be able to look at challenges as problems, as equations that can be solved. If you break it apart appropriately, if you study it appropriately, no matter what the problem is, you can find a solution for it, but you have to be committed to finding that solution.
All right, and Dr. Jones, you've done a lot academically to lead you to where you are today with your career. Can you talk to us more about what your, day in, day out looks like on working, and how, in fact, you're impacting the community with the work that you do?
So I have 3 girls, 11, 7, and one is 3, is going to be 4 next month. And my wife is an ER doc, and she's also the state medical director for disaster preparedness. So for the last 3 months or so, my day-to-day has been homeschooling and chef and counselor and negotiator. Like that has consumed the lion's share of my life, as it has for so many folks. And now my day-to-day is really about, and I'll talk about some of the work stuff, but the reality is our home stuff matters a lot. And our home stuff is a part of who we are. I think that's the value of going to an HBCU, because you realize you don't disaggregate academics from social, external work from family. You don't disaggregate, you bring it all together because it's a part of who you are. And so now it's about helping my own children understand what's going on in the world. I have girls, I don't have Black boys, but at the same time, they're impacted by the systemic racism that exists. They're impacted by the structures that exist. They're impacted by the subtle things and the implicit biases that are out there. So I have to help them understand that. Now, once I've done that part, I am also running the Arkansas Regional Innovation Hub. And when COVID hit, we immediately, so we're Arkansas's first makerspace, which means that we have the tools for people around Arkansas to make anything. 3D printers, laser cutters, wood shop, welding, screen printing. You want to make t-shirts, we can do it. Block printing, graphic design, you name it. So we're high touch. Lots of people coming together. We do classes, workshops, events, and you name it. So when COVID hit and we had to shut down, we immediately pivoted to 2 things. One was actually making PPE for the medical field, but also galvanizing makers for local makers of PPE, the protective, personal protective equipment, to meet the local demand right where they are. And so we have the Arkansas Maker Task Force. The other thing that we did was we switched to virtual content. Was we realized that, well, look, folks still need the content. They still need access to the rich resources, the classes and workshops. And then the last part of what we did was, it's one thing to have the content available, but if you can't actually access it, it means nothing. So we're going around and providing mobile hotspots for different communities and areas. Now we can't do all of Arkansas yet, but our vision would be to be able to provide all of Arkansas any of the gaps. 25% of Arkansas does not have access to Wi-Fi, to broadband. And out of the percent that does have access to it, probably another 30 or 40%, even if you have access, you can't afford it. These are the challenges that we're trying to solve, because I grew up in a modest family. You know, you might have looked at us and said we were kind of middle class, but the reality is my folks were living paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes sometimes the two didn't meet. And so I've seen shut-off notices and the like and all that, and at times we're struggling. And I think what I realize is that if not for opportunities, if not for mentors, if not for people helping me out, and if not for, by God's design and by chance, the system of education was structured in a way that aligns with the way I think, I wouldn't be where I am now. So part of my job is to create multiple systems so that other people who don't think the way I think, who learn in different ways, who can be productive in different ways, for them to be able to be successful. That's kind of what drives me.
Well, Chris, you're a hometown hero. So you've gone from Atlanta to Massachusetts, and you were dean. Now we can't leave out the dean at MIT. I mean, tell us about your title as dean and what you did and how that came about, and then why you actually took this job as CEO in Arkansas of this makerspace. So what caused you to go from Massachusetts as a dean to Arkansas, and tell us how that position came about, because I'm sure you had to set precedents as a Black man from Morehouse and dean of MIT. That's amazing.
Yeah, appreciate it. You know, it's a crazy journey. When I finished my 2 masters, my wife was in med school. We were broke, and I figured, hey, we're already broke. I'm used to working hard, so why not teach high school for a year? So I actually taught high school for a year. And then when she matched in Boston, that's when I said, well, let me look for a different job, because I wanted more flexibility to be able to meet her demands, and to be a really big support for her. So that's when the assistant dean of MIT opportunity came up. I had worked with the office while I was in grad schools, really focused on how do we address issues of diversity and inclusion, how do we address issues of equity, and that was the focus as assistant dean. And I spent 10 years doing that. During that tenure time is when I picked up my Ph.D. Went back to school at MIT, and I was working and doing a Ph.D. And then once I finished that, I had been involved in a neighborhood organization as a volunteer, and then I joined the board. And while I was on the board, the executive director there said, hey, Chris, I'm going to step down. Would you be willing to step up as executive director? My first answer was no. And then he came back a few months later and asked again. I said, okay, let me think about it. And he came back a month later and asked again. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I was the executive director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, which is a community-based organization in Boston, resident empowerment. So I did that for 3 years. And then what we realized, by then we'd had 2 daughters. My wife was finished with her schooling. She was a captain in the Air Force in the kind of in-between time. She did a year of residency, 4 years as military in the Air Force, and then she deployed to Afghanistan, and then came back. So what we realized that if we didn't leave Boston then we were going to be in Boston for good. So, because she was just finishing up her fellowship. So we moved to Maryland, where her parents were. She had gone to Howard. We were familiar with the place. Lots of Morehouse and Spelman, Clark graduates were in the DMV. So we went there, spent 3 years there, and then an opportunity came open for us to come to Arkansas. We actually moved for her, and then I was doing management consulting at the time with a phenomenal guy, not an HBCU grad, but he's still a good brother, and it was BCT Partners out of New Jersey. Randall Pinkett is the owner and the founder. So I came back and was really trying to figure out how can I make a difference on the ground here. I'm doing management consulting everywhere else. But as a child, I always knew I wanted to raise my family in Arkansas. And my wife and I agreed early on that we would eventually come back. So now I'm back, and going out doing consulting wasn't it. So I started to look around, and lo and behold, one day this opportunity came up. I knew some of the people involved with the organization, but the opportunity came up and it was great because it's at the intersection of running a nonprofit, doing technical stuff, doing community development and community engagement work, having some policy aspects. So it really, entrepreneurship, it was at the intersection of a lot of what I'd done before, and I love it.
So Dr. Jones, let me ask you this. If you had a chance, right, to go back and give some words of wisdom to that 17-year-old young man that was coming through the gates of Morehouse, and again, so many, just like yourself, what type of words of wisdom would you share with yourself or someone who's interested in kind of following a similar career path as your own?
That's another good question. What would I tell my 17-year-old self? So one thing I would retell myself is something that my older cousin told me. We were sitting on the porch in Pine Bluff, and he was a few years older, and he was in college already. And he said, Chris, live your life with no regrets. So, and he followed it up and said, what that means, it doesn't mean just ignore all the stuff you do. What it means is spend the time on the front end thinking about what you do so that when you do it, you won't regret it. And I think I did that for the most part. I would encourage my 17-year-old self to do it a little bit more, to spend even more time thinking about my decisions and my actions, so that when I did them, there would be no regrets. And I think the other thing I would say is, I always value relationships, and I tend to keep up with friends once I make them. But I would spend a little bit more time going deeper with the relationships, if I were to tell my 17-year-old self that. The relationships you form in college are the ones you have for life. And I still text and call and hang out with my guys from Graves Hall, the guys who were Ronald McNair scholars. We're in touch with each other all the time. And yet I realize as I get older that there are parts of their life that I didn't know about. You know, like what was your sister like? What were your parents' like? You know, what was the thing that bothered you the most when you were a kid, and how's that influenced you now? So I think I would tell my 17-year-old self to, as I'm building relationships, to go 2 or 3 levels down in those relationships, because they matter.
Well, you know, Chris, that's exactly why we started this platform of HBCU Highlights, because when you think about it, you just meet people where they are. So you're at Morehouse, I'm at Spelman, but nobody ever really says, well, how did you get here? And what are your parents like? And where did you grow up? And so these stories, including yours, is so inspiring that I know we have a future astronaut watching, a future physicist, someone that's on the fence trying to decide if they should go to MIT or if they should go to Morehouse. And to know that you have the option to go to Morehouse, graduate with a double major, and then go on to MIT for 3 degrees is incredible. So you are definitely a trailblazer and a true Morehouse man. But one thing that stands out about this interview is you're surrounded by strong women in your house. You have 3 daughters. Your wife is also an HBCU alum, you said, from Howard. So let me ask you, do you foresee, you and your wife, I'm sure you've talked about it, are you all foreseeing that your children will also go to an HBCU, maybe Spelman, maybe Howard? Have you all even thought about it? And do your kids know about HBCUs and how much they've impacted you and your wife?
Oh, they know. they definitely know. So my wife told me before we had kids that if we had sons, then she's fine with them going to Morehouse. But if we had daughters, then she said I'll give you 1 for Spelman. So right now our daughters know that it's going to be Howard or Spelman. Now, of course, at the end of the day, we want them to go wherever they will flourish the most, wherever they will be most successful. And we believe and we realize that the HBCU experience can really bring that out of them. And so they've been to homecomings, their godparents, their play aunts and uncles are HBCU grads, and we were very intentional about surrounding them with HBCU grads. because at the end of the day, it is their decision, but we want to make sure that they know the sort of depth and fullness of the value of an HBCU experience, which you really can't put a price tag on it. You really can't describe it. You have to experience it. And so we try to expose them to, again, auntie such and such went to Howard, uncle such and such went to Morehouse, and it runs the gamut. So we're hopeful that they will go to an HBCU. My wife is expecting that I'll only get one to Spelman, but I'm secretly holding out for all three of them to get there.
So I noticed Andrea says Chris. I'm saying Dr. Jones. I know it's a lot of weight on that, so I'm going to keep saying Dr. Jones. So if there is someone who wants to reach out to you, wants to follow you on social media, are there any links that you can share, websites, email addresses? Because like I said, there are a lot of folks that you have motivated and inspired by your words today, including myself.
Good stuff. Andrea and I go way back to the NASA times. I still have pictures of you, Andrea, from that trip to Florida.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we had a good time in Florida for the GEM Fellowship.
Yeah.
Now that was a collection of engineers and scientists from all over the country, and it was amazing to be able to both have a blast and have fun, but also to learn how to work hard, and to learn how to build relationships, and to learn how to study and take advantage of opportunities. So it's been great. But look, and because of that, I realized so many folks open themselves up to me that I am totally open to help out in any way that I can. My personal email address is cmjinc76@gmail. You can email me. My work email address is cjones@arhub.org. My Twitter account is cmjones99. So, reach out to me any way you can. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to support, because I think that's how we're going to end up changing the world.
Well, Dr. Chris Jones, you are changing the world. And I just have to get this question in, because you all know I'm a patent attorney, so I'm very passionate about makerspaces. I'm on the television show Make 48. That's filmed at a makerspace. So I know Make 48 crew and team are watching these interviews, and they know we're on our way to Arkansas. We will definitely have to have a Make 48 at your makerspace. But I want to just ask you this, because makerspaces are so special, and they're all around the country, and so many people don't know about them as inventors. And so you're really making a difference, and they're so fortunate to have someone with your educational experience, but just like you said, because you know the value of community, you're just a good person. So I could see people coming in with these ideas, and you're able to make them, and it's free. So tell us maybe one story, because I've seen a lot of interviews you've done on television, and you're so proud of what you do. It has to be one story or one thing that you've done at this makerspace as the CEO or executive director that you're proud of. Can you tell us about that moment?
Yeah, so y'all on these one questions or one responses, because that's tough. But before I answer it, though, let me say, you all are welcome anytime. Please come. I would love to have you in our space with 22,000 square feet of fun, and it will guarantee be a blast. And I'll also say that one of the things that I realized while I was at MIT, the CSAIL, Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, one of the best computer science and artificial intelligence departments, labs in the world. They have a room, and it's a big room. And in that room, it has pretty much any and everything you need to make robots, to make things that are connected to artificial intelligence. And what that showed, and you can go in as a student, grab whatever you want, use it, and then magically it just gets replenished. So what that showed me was that when you remove the barriers and provide resources to folks, it unleashes their creativity. So what we love about what we do at the Innovation Hub is that we're saying, here are tools, use them, make whatever you want to make, create whatever you want to create. If we can help you, great. If we can't, we'll connect you with someone else. So there are a number of stories that we have that are a part of that but the thing I think that stands out the most is one of the youth that have been there. She started at the Innovation Hub probably when she was 11. She's learned how to use every piece of equipment that's there. And the reason I think that her story is so powerful is because now, in addition to her creating new things on her own, she is now teaching and instructing others. So she's one of our instructors now. And that speaks to the power of learning early and then being able to give that learning back to others. So again, we have folks who made new walking canes. We have people who made new fishing rods. So one guy made a new fishing reel for his brother who couldn't use his hand anymore. It runs the gamut, but even with all that, I still go back to it's the personal growth, the personal change and trajectory that always matters most to me. And I fundamentally believe that, and we talk about it as a team all the time. Our goal is for everyone who enters the doors of the Innovation Hub, for you to leave better when you walk out the doors. So wherever you start, doesn't matter where you start, I don't care, who cares, no matter what you look like, where you're from, but when you leave, you'll be better as a result of having been through our doors. And so we work hard to get there.
Wow. Well, Dr. Jones, we thank you for working hard, and we thank you for being with us today and being a catalyst for change. We thank you for your leadership, for sharing your academic journey, and just being a motivation for so many people that are tuning in today. So again, Andrea and I really, really thank you for your excellence and allowing us to spotlight you on HBCU Highlights.
Much appreciated. Much appreciated to you both.